Hello and welcome to Dyslexia Explored. I'm Darius Namdaran, your host, and
I'm Jolie, your co-host.
today we've got a really great guest, a returning guest, actually. She is a former head of education at the British Dyslexia Association, a trustee of the Adult Dyslexia Centre, and now founder over the last 10 years of Positive Dyslexia. She runs this centre in London, which is like an OCN training center for teachers, workplace needs assessors. She's got a team of assessors that do dyslexia assessors. They train companies on dyslexia. She runs conferences 3 times a year for educators. She's done a dyscalculia conference and a dyslexia conference for adults and a dyslexia conference for Senko. So I'd like to introduce you to Katrina Cochrane. It's really great to have you back on the podcast.
Hi, Darius. Hi, Joe.
Hey.
And we brought you back because there's been this kind of rumbling question in the back of our minds about dyslexia assessments. And when we're giving talks on dyslexia to parents, often they're kind of like, oh, should we get our child assessed for dyslexia or not? Is it worth the money? Should we be doing it or not? We already know they're already getting accommodations and all these kind of questions. And we thought it'd be nice for the three of us to just have a conversation around this because I think it could benefit a lot of parents.
Yeah, I've been in that position myself with my own son. Do I go and get a formal assessment with my own son? I think everyone's very different. I take a very individual approach to each parent that comes to me and asks for an assessment, and I'll ask them lots of questions. I may send them back somewhere or signpost them somewhere else. It's not an automatic thing that I will say, yes, I'll assess you. I think we, as specialist assessors, are very careful and try and give the best advice to parents because we know what it's like. It is such a minefield for parents.
Yes. So it would be nice to go through some of the scenarios and go through some of the pros and cons of different scenarios. Joe, what kind of scenarios do you think are front and center with some of our parents at the moment?
Well, I think we've recently been speaking to parents who've got children at different ages. So some primary, probably sort of slightly later primary, and some secondary. And I suppose I'm fascinated at the fact that you might not recommend an assessment. We've got two children, both dyslexic, and when it was suggested to us to get dyslexia assessments, we're like, oh gosh, yes, of course. So I guess, does it depend on the age and stage, or what comes out in the conversations that would make you sort of say absolutely yes, an assessment, or is that the best course of action for your child?
Depends on your pockets as well. It's
Yeah.
not cheap to have an assessment done. And there's various reasons why an assessment is so expensive. For a start, we have several years of training. We have to buy a kit of tests. I've recently had to re-buy a new test kit because all the tests have changed. That's cost me nearly a couple of £1,000.
Oh, wow.
The papers that we use, the response papers that we use, they're £4 or £5 each, and you're often using 10. You could be using 10 in an assessment. So it's not as simple as I think people think that specialist assessors are raking it in, and it takes us hours to do the assessments. So it will take me at least 2.5, 3 hours to carry out the assessment with the child. And then it's hours writing up the report as well. So if you break it down on an hourly rate, it's fairly small, actually. If you go to an educational psychologist, they will often charge twice as much. And actually, your report may be half as long. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes our reports are too long, I think. But there's lots of reasons why we have to set the prices where we do. And obviously, prices do vary across the country. But the main thing is, if you're looking for an assessment, find somebody with an assessment practicing certificate that's current. And then that report can last you all the way through. So if you're coming as a parent and you've got a child in primary school, you can get quite a lot of use out of that report right way through to university. So in that respect, yes, I think that's a really good idea. When it falls down is that sadly schools, the teachers aren't trained to recognise what's in a report or know what to do with the report or implement it. they haven't had the training. They desperately want to support these children, but they don't know how to. Another reason why I might put a parent off might be if the child is about 15, coming up to GCSEs, they tend to then be assessed internally for exam access arrangements. And so there really is no need to have same tests done, really, pay for them, when all they need is probably the extra time or a reader or a scribe or something. But then to perhaps come back in sixth form if they're going to go to university and get the report done then. So lots of different reasons why you should or you shouldn't have a report. For me, I wanted to know for sure what was actually going on with my son. I wanted to know, was he a naughty child? Was he a disruptive child? Was he a child who couldn't concentrate? Or was there a reason for it? So it really meant a lot to me, and it was worth spending the money. But for other parents, there's a range of really good screeners out there now, and that might be enough for some parents.
Do you think it's also a case of the right time to get assessed as well? Do you think there's a journey in terms of you might do a screener at some point? Like you've just described, 14's not a good, 15's not a really good time, but a few years later, once all that pressure's over, but just before university and so on. I think it might also be useful to point out that dyslexia assessments aren't things that you redo, because once you've got dyslexia, it's not something that people at university or in the workplace or so on say, oh, you need that updated. It doesn't need updated, really, does it?
Actually, I do assess a lot of accountants, for example, and a lot of people in the medical profession, GPs. For their professional exams, they have to be less than 5 years old. And so even if they have had an assessment done for university, they do have to have a brand new one done for that particular exam board. So it's always worth finding out. But generally speaking, that report should last you all the way through. And you don't change your ability levels. Sadly, you can't really improve your memory skills or your processing skills. So that's not going to change either. But other things like your literacy levels could change, hopefully, a lot.
Yeah, because I suppose, I mean, I'm speaking from our experience, 2 children, both with dyslexia, and then sort of appears in them. I want to say manifests, but that sounds like not quite the right word. But you know, how their dyslexia is expressed within them is so completely different. And actually, that's where we found the report quite helpful, because it helped us understand, like you were saying about your son, specific sort of quirks, actually why it's that they can't do something rather than they won't do something. But I suppose we're a little bit out of that age and stage now. These kids are now in their 20s. So I'm wondering, is there enough flexibility within the school system with the screeners that you understand enough about your child's individual sort of challenges or quirks? Or
I think the other thing to bear in mind is that every school is different. Revision in each school is very different. And I come across some schools where fantastic, absolutely wonderful provision, and then other schools where it's sadly not as good. So it's what will happen next as a result. If you're going in with that report and the report says child needs this, this, and this, it may not make any difference whatsoever. In terms of things like extra time, it's for the school to decide. It's not for a report to say. The report may guide the school and suggest that the child needs 25% extra time, but it has no validity, actually. It's for the school to decide. So I think a lot of it is around awareness, raising awareness for parents, so that parents really understand what the report means. They know how to support their child at home. It's for teachers to be made more aware of what to do next, how to help that child, what that report actually means, and not dismiss it. I mean, I remember when I was working in the school, these reports were just sort of put into a folder and just put somewhere and never looked at. And sometimes I say to parents that just take out the bullet points and just highlight them. Go in with that. Don't go in with the full report. Just go in with some highlighted bits and break it down and make it as simple as possible for the school, that they can just know what to do next. So yes, I mean, I think as an assessor, I always believe in the reasoning behind wanting a report and how valuable they are. For some parents, I do say, look, if you're not really sure, and it's a lot of money, perhaps go away and do a screener like Nessie. It'll give you a report. It'll show you that there's something. It'll only cost you about £10, and then decide what to do after that.
I see. So you're really conscious as an assessor that you're not saying, oh yeah, everyone needs an assessment and so on, or seen to even be saying, oh yeah, because you actually turn people away and just say, actually, I've not got the capacity. There's so many
Oh no, I
assessors.
mean, I can always find the capacity, but
Oh right.
it's whether or not it's the right thing for that parent.
Ah, I see.
Yeah.
Now, maybe that's a choice I shouldn't make, but I try and give the parents all the different choices and say, have a think about all these different things and then come back. And I'm here if you want to see me later. And then sometimes some of the parents come back. Other times they've gone to school and the schools say, we're going to try this program with your child. And that's helped the child tremendously.
I find that fascinating because I suppose from my own personal experience, anyone who asks me, should I get a dyslexia report? I mean, I would say just from my own personal perspective, and I'm not an assessor, it's like absolutely without a shadow of a doubt, the benefits to me personally, having done it as an adult and having done it for our children, I know it's 500 quid and it's painful. But I also know that it's actually compared to America, that's 1.5 grand to 2 grand in America. It couldn't be much cheaper than that to get a proper job done, basically. It couldn't be cheaper. It's not like it's inflated.
No, and we're constantly having to prove our worth as assessors as well. So every 3 years, we have to submit a report to our overseeing body, and that's judged and marked. And if we don't meet the criteria, then we don't have our assessment practicing certificates renewed. It's a really, really stringent process to be an assessor.
Yeah.
So hopefully you get a good person, they'll guide you through. And we signpost as well. So we may signpost onto an optometrist. Lots of children come to me and we always ask questions about vision and whether or not the print's jumping about, getting headaches. So we will then signpost. We will look for signs of ADHD. We'll look for signs of autism, signs of dyspraxia, signpost appropriately. And that's one of the main differences, I think, is if you go down the medical route. So dyslexia is seen as educational. All the other things are seen as medical. So if you go down the medical route and you're lucky enough to get an assessment for ADHD, it won't say all those signs of dyslexia there. Whereas our reports will look at all the different areas. And although we can't offer medication or prescribe medication or anything like that, our reports are enough for the university to put in place things for that person in terms of their neurodiversity.
Fascinating.
And yeah, I think I'm thinking back to especially the experience our youngest had. So she had her assessment when she was 15. And actually, it was a really positive experience for her because it was sort of 2.5, 3 hours, which sort of surprised her initially. But she did come out of it feeling incredibly sort of validated. And she actually really enjoyed the process. Now, that doesn't necessarily justify spending the funds on it, but it definitely it helped me when I recommend it or suggest it to other parents to say, actually, it feels a little bit bizarre to say we're getting you assessed because we think you might have a sort of learning challenge, but yet here you are and you're going to actually really enjoy it.
Well, and then that's the other thing. I never tell a child that it's going to take 3 hours because otherwise they're, oh no, I can't. But they always say that went really quickly. I really enjoyed it. And my old boss used to say somebody should walk out of an assessment 6 inches taller than they came in. And you see that. You see these children or these adults as well. They're hunched over. They feel that nobody's ever said anything positive to them. That some teachers always picking out their poor spelling or all of those different things. And here's someone who's actually saying, well, you're really good at that. You can put together those blocks really well. You can put together those pictures really well, very quickly. And you're actually praising them for those areas that they can do that sometimes they've never had that praise before. So they do really enjoy it. And they go out, they want to know that there's a reason. There's a lot of talk about labels and is labeling good and we're labeling too many people. We're not. I don't think we are labeling too many people. We just are identifying these difficulties and being able to show a way of supporting those difficulties better.
Absolutely. I still remember my dyslexia. I don't remember many things in life because my memory's atrocious. I can't even remember a movie I watched like 6 months or a year ago. Hardly remember people's names, but I still remember that dyslexia assessment. I still remember what it did for me and with me. There's something very deep that it addresses that it's really hard to put your finger on, that is healing. And it's a real healing. And I think what surprises people when they get an assessment done is it's not like, oh, you've got dyslexia or you don't. It's a lot richer than that because I suppose we talked about when to not get a dyslexia assessment and when to get one. Let's really concentrate on what you get from a dyslexia assessment on the basis that really depends on your circumstances. But one of the things that you get is you understand your processing level, for example. Like when our daughter got onto the processing centile and she's like on the sort of lowest third or fourth centile. And I said, I thought I had low processing. And then I see hers. I'm like, oh my goodness me. And you start to distinguish certain key metrics. And I think they're a bit of a kind of blur for so many people. I suspect we need to talk about AI, maybe interpreting some of this, maybe. But it would be nice to get some interpretation of what all the gobbledygook actually means. But there's a lot in there, isn't there?
It's a huge amount. I mean, certainly just going back to your point about when not to have an assessment, I would say don't come and have an assessment at the end of the summer term, for example, where you're absolutely exhausted, needs to have a break. One of the things that parents don't realise is that because of the processing difficulties, these children are absolutely exhausted by the end of the day. And it's about, we talk about metacognition, and the whole assessment side is around metacognition. Who am I? What are the things I'm good at? What are the things I'm not so good at? What can I work at to make that area better? And I think that self-discovery is really, really important for that person moving forward. Going back to my own son as well, he didn't realise he had a bad memory. And it was, but then when he realised that he did, he then found strategies to help himself, and then also realised he had other strategies in place that were supporting him that he didn't realise were strategies. So I think that whole process of that journey, that discovery. I think the other thing that I've come across is a lot of adults say to me, I used to be dyslexic. And then I have to say to them, I'm really sorry, but you're still dyslexic. You've just got better strategies. It's not something that you like measles. And sometimes that's quite difficult for that person to actually sort of realise that it's an ongoing thing and that they have to sort of perhaps find different strategies if they move jobs or get a promotion or something like that. Something else is needed.
I'm remembering you, I think it was you that shared your story about your son losing his passport when he was abroad. Was that you that shared that story? Yeah, that was in the previous podcast, and how resourceful he ended up being.
He used his younger brother who was with him, who'd luckily gone to the safe in the hotel and taken out the passport for him, realizing his older brother had left it behind. So yeah, that was his strategy to rely on other people.
But it is that collaborative approach. We find lots of different strategies where people cover our backs on things we're not so good at, like Joe with me. And
well, I remember our passport story when we were in Australia.
What was that one? We've had a few passport stories, Joe.
Well, Darius was like, right, you've got to be really careful of your passports when you travel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in a sock and then I'm going to hang them off the curtain rail and no one will see it in the curtain, which is true. So they were completely safe, except they were so safe and out of sight that then when we left to move down Australia, we left them in that little traveler's hotel room. And yeah, that was a very collaborative effort to find someone who was still in that town and flying down to Sydney to go in. and find a sock with the path. So brilliant idea, brilliant creative thinking, dyslexic thinking. I can solve this problem because there was no safe in the room.
Oh, right.
But it's the follow through at the
I-
other end.
I was going to say, I'm ex-cabin crew, long time ago, and cabin crew trick is that you put your passport and one shoe in the safe, and then you won't leave the hotel room because you've only got one shoe. You'll realise that the other one's in the safe.
Oh, that is genius.
Because you're going to so many different hotels and things. Mine's not on it, but yeah, you won't leave with one shoe on.
That's great. So, okay, so let's dig in to dyslexia assessments. You've had one, okay. What are the benefits of dyslexia assessments? I can think off the top of my head, because we work with so many university students,
Yeah.
that if you're going to, in the UK and you're going to university, the rules are for disability students allowance, you've got to have had an assessment of some sort from
Yeah.
school. Can you clarify what the rules are? Or not school, but
Yeah.
sorry, not from school, either from school or as an adult. But could you clarify what the rules are for disability students allowance and what they accept? Do you know?
I mean, just in case the Scottish system is different, do come in it. But for DSA, to apply to Student Finance England, you have to have had a diagnostic report carried out by someone with a current assessment practicing certificate. And the front of the report will have the number, and you can check on SASC, which is our body, if that person's actually got an assessment practicing certificate and it's current. If you have, you just apply through Student Finance England. So different in Scotland. And yeah,
I think it's the same process, but maybe some small administrative slightly difference, but the same principle. Yeah.
now, a lot of people say to me, oh, I was assessed at school. And then when I drilled down, and actually what they had was they had a screener. A screener is not a diagnostic assessment. A screener can only look at traits of dyslexia, signs of dyslexia. It's not a diagnosis. So you do need to go back and find out exactly what happened and what was done. And if you haven't had a full diagnostic assessment for university, you do need to have that.
So do you find that a number of students come out from school thinking they've had an assessment, but actually they've not?
The parents think that the screener, the online screener, or there's quite a few screeners at the moment, there's a couple of paper-based ones, that is an assessment, but it's not. They're fairly accurate, and generally you do get the same diagnosis, but obviously they're very short. They're only about sort of 20 minutes, something like that. They're not the sort of full 2.5, 3 hour thing.
Yeah, that's a fascinating scenario where you've got quite an accurate screener, and then you've got the full diagnostic assessment. That's interesting, that scenario.
So the difference also is that I make lots of notes during the assessments. I make lots of notes about how someone behaves in an assessment. So it might be that they are finding it difficult to concentrate in the assessment. They're looking out the window. I've had children tell me about squirrels going across the garden and things like that. They clearly have got difficulty with concentration. And so I'm able to signpost back to the GP for further testing. A screener, an online screener, is not going to give you all of that information. It's not going to look at handwriting, for example. And lots of these children, because dyspraxia often co-occurs with dyslexia, have got difficulties with handwriting. You can't see that from the keyboard, for example. So there is a huge value, I think, in seeing that person. We do assessments online now for children and adults. So you could be assessing somebody anywhere around the world, but at least you're seeing how they're writing, what hand they're writing with, what's their pen grip, all different things like that. You're asking them how they feel about their dyslexia. What do they think they find they struggle most with, for example? And you're putting all that information into the report and building up that narrative.
So is it a fair rule of thumb then that if a child's had you've done a screener in school and the screener's definitely suggested that they would be dyslexic, that if they're progressing on to university, that's a good sign, I'm guessing, to get your assessment? It's sort of money well spent.
So yes. if there's dyslexia in the family, generally speaking, a sibling will probably be dyslexic as well because it is genetic. There's various things that red flags, and there's some good questionnaires as well. So the BDA have a questionnaire that you can download for children and for adults that just asks some very simple questions. Just to do something like that first. When on my website, for example, there's a questionnaire, and it helps parents to just realise they're always answering yes to the questions as well. So for me, anyway, and I think for my colleagues as well, it's not a simple process of just saying, yes, taking your money and we're going to have the assessment. There's lots of aftercare afterwards as well that you don't have with the screener. And parents come back to me years later and ask me questions that I'm always happy to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think I really respect your desire to honor people's choice, that you can say yes or no and so on. But I think it's so compelling how valuable an assessment is on so many levels
Yeah.
for a person. Like, I mean, once you've got it, you can go and get University Disability Students Allowance. That's worth it. You
Yeah.
can, hand on heart, I think as a parent in school, sometimes I don't know what it's like. It depends on the school. Sometimes the school say, yeah, you've got some processing difficulties, or yeah, we're on it. Don't worry about it, and so on. And sometimes as a parent, you just need to know exactly where you stand. And then once you've got a report, you kind of like, oh my goodness. And then in the report, they've got recommendations about, oh, they've suggested my favorite mind mapping, or they've suggested
Yeah.
speech to text or text to speech, or I wonder what that is. And you can go and explore what those things are, which aren't necessarily things that your teacher will be telling you because they really don't have the time.
No, and we divide it up. There's things for parents to do at home, and then there's things for the school to bear in mind as well, and resources and links and books, all sorts of things. And I also run parents courses as well. So we've got one coming up for the Adult Dyslexia Centre in January, trying to support parents through this whole journey.
Oh, tell us about that course. What is that?
So that's 3 sessions in January. I'm doing the initial awareness session. Then we've got Amanda Keane talking about dyscalculia, and we've got Don Stevenson talking about literacy, supporting parents with all those different things. What are resources that will help at home, and really sort of engage these parents, help them realise they're not on their own. Because I think that's the other thing, that many parents think that their child's the only child with dyslexia in the class. And in fact, some schools do try and sort of, and I've known schools who've told me that there is no dyslexia in the school. So parents can feel very isolated. So being with other parents, really important to make those links. I feel stronger.
What do they need to do to be allowed into that group? Do they need to have had an assessment or
Oh,
anything
no,
like
not
that?
at
Or
all.
is that open to anyone?
Open to anyone,
Oh,
www.adc.org.uk for the website, and just log on. I think it's £60 for the 3 sessions.
excellent. That's well worth it. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you're listening to this
Yeah.
right now,
Yeah.
just swipe up. It'll be in a blue link down there. And there'll be other links as well of things that we're talking about here in the show notes as well. So could you just say it again, please?
It's www.adc.org.uk.
ADC.
Adult Dyslexia Centre. And then there are lots of parents like myself, because their difficulties with their own children, decided to go and train to be specialist teachers, specialist assessors. And so I run the level 3 course for teaching assistants, and that's run over a longer period of time. But I'm running that with the Dyscalculia Network in February. And so we got a lot of input about dyscalculia, because that is getting very, very, people are understanding more about dyscalculia and want to know about dyscalculia assessments now as well. So we look at screening in that.
So do you get dyscalculia kind of like the equivalent of a dyslexia assessment for dyscalculia at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's changing, it's evolving quite a lot. So last year you had to have a dyslexia assessment first, followed by a dyscalculia assessment. But I think they're now sort of, it's evolving into just a dyscalculia assessment if you've got the evidence from the questionnaires that it is just dyscalculia, not dyslexia, difficulties with maths in dyslexia. So we've got more people training to be dyscalculia assessors, dyscalculia teachers as well. So it's really exciting. And the Dyscalculia Network, if you haven't come across them before, do amazing work.
Well, it's brilliant to have the resources for parents, because our situation is Darius is dyslexic, our 2 children are dyslexic, but I'm not dyslexic. And so actually for me, it was quite a steep learning curve to really try and understand, because you want the best for your children and you're encouraging them to do well and to succeed. And so it's resisting that urge to go, let's just try a little bit harder with your spelling or with your remembering or with your whatever it is. And it's,
with your passport.
Or remembering where your passport is.
And going back to my previous point about the fact that these children, they finish school, they are exhausted, and then they've got loads of homework to do, or they might have after school clubs before they do their homework. By the time they get down to do their homework, doing more of something is actually counterproductive, really.
I mean, I have to say, I was that parent who was like, let's just bunk off your homework. Yes, very sorry about that to all my children's teachers, but I just couldn't face the fight at the end of the day. But I think it's just that knowledge for parents as well, to appreciate their child's strengths as well. And I think coming out of the assessment or coming out of these courses for parents to say, okay, so you might never win the school spelling bee, but hey, do you know what? You're always going to win the sort of how do we solve this problem in technology competition. So it's actually, I think we talk about it a lot, that if you can get a child through school with their confidence intact, then they can pretty much take on the world. And putting all of that time and energy into strengthening your strengths rather than strengthening your weaknesses. So, but I think as a parent, when you're in the school system, you very much, I'm just going back to our experience, you feel like the criteria for academic success are quite narrowly defined, and they're not really going to apply to someone with dyslexia. So that encouragement, I think, is really important for parents to how do we navigate the school years.
And as I say to loads of parents, we've still got a very Victorian school system, but these aren't Victorian children, are they? It's not fit for purpose. And as a parent, you have to be an advocate for your child, don't you?
Yeah.
And so arming yourself with the knowledge of what your child's strengths are, so that you're not always sort of being told, well, they can't do that, they can't do that. It's as you say, Jo, but they're very good at problem solving. They've got very good visual memory, or looking at the whole picture rather than just on the things they can't do.
So 2 things I'd really love to make sure by the end of this podcast we've asked you is about the conference you're just about to be doing with technology that helps. And also, I'd really like to just go through briefly the anatomy of an assessment, because I've met so many parents who've come to me and said, we had this assessment done, but to be honest, I don't understand it at all. And I open it up with them, and I'm not an expert in doing assessments or whatever. I've had my own. I understand how to do the practical applications that you recommend at the end. I'm the person who implements the strategies.
Yeah.
Could you just go through the anatomy of the overview of what's in an assessment?
Yeah. There's very clear areas that we're looking at. We're looking at underlying ability. So we will look at those things like non-verbal problem solving skills, and that's often where they're very good at. We'll look at verbal ability, we'll look at expressive and receptive language skills, and then we'll look at attainment levels. So we'll look at reading and spelling and writing, comprehension, and then we'll look at memory, processing, something called rapid naming. Rapid naming is a real indicator of dyslexic type difficulties. So the child will read off a set of numbers or a set of letters and will time them. And it's very clear to see the children who've got processing difficulties, they're much, much slower at reading out those things. So a whole bank of different tests. So we will also look at things like, I say beforehand, the vision, and ask those questions about vision. So we're getting that picture about whether or not there's a visual difficulty there also. We'll look at the speed of handwriting, speed of reading, all of those things that contribute to that dyslexic profile. So very, very in-depth testing. And then we'll look at, we've got new data definition of dyslexia, which is a Delphi definition, and we'll match up all of those scores against our definition and come up with a diagnosis.
And so you've got all those tests and you give them the results, all the numbers of those tests, don't you?
Yes. And then at the back there's a summary table. And actually for any parent, it's best to go right to the back and look at the table of all the scores and look for that spiky profile where they've got high scores in certain areas and much lower scores in other areas, and check whether or not it is that spiky profile.
Because what you're seeing with dyslexia often is a typical thinker has sort of more of an average range on all of these kind of things. They all kind of roughly track each other. But then with dyslexia, suddenly you're really great at one thing and really bad at something else in terms of processing, etc. And that disparity shows up as these, it's kind of like being a manual car versus an automatic car. You just stall all the time. You're not an automatic. You have to very intentionally go through these different difficulties.
That's why it's specific learning difficulty, rather
Yes,
than general learning difficulty, where you would struggle with all areas, really.
I see. And that's why it's called SPLD, specific
Yes.
learning.
Yeah.
SPLD. Is this SP for specific? SP. Someone with dyslexia made that one up then. SPLD. Yeah, okay. Specific learning difficulty rather than the general learning difficulty. So it's that finding those specific things that are a challenge. And that is incredibly useful, especially when you start understanding the challenges with processing and the challenges with working memory and all these other rapid naming. If you understand where you're really the lowest at certain things, you're not there to try and solve those things per se and get better at them. You're there to start finding what are strategies you can put in place to just compensate for them, because often they're low level administrative functional tasks rather than higher level intelligence tasks.
Yeah. And it may be that the child needs specialist tuition, and there are people who've had the training to be able to give a very multisensory teaching program to somebody. So it's very visual, very auditory, very kinesthetic program for that child. And they will then sort of come on leaps and bounds. What they're not getting is they're not getting that targeted intervention in school. And a lot of teachers still think dyslexia is just about reading and spelling, and it's not. It's so much more complex than that, because it is the processing and the memory as well.
I know. Oh, I was just going to say, with our oldest child, who was diagnosed at primary school, like, has always been a voracious reader. She's now a librarian. She reads book after book after book. So it was never about reading for her, but she's incredibly eloquent verbally. So you ask her, tell me about the story you're going to write for English. And she's like, well, this is going to happen. And there's that character and there's this and there's that. And then we'd be brilliant. Let's write that down. One sentence.
A good way into that is not writing it down, but scribing it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it's always finding a different way into strength, so that the content is being marked rather than the spelling.
Yeah, so she had scribes and readers, and actually, but I suppose it's just dispelling that myth that it's not just always reading, and coloured overlays, and again, she could copy down what was on the board, but she couldn't understand a single word of it. She could either read it and understand it or copy it down. And so we could get everything printed out ahead of time so that she could just highlight it. So it's sometimes it's those nuances that we find quite helpful.
Definitely. Yeah, there's so many things that can be put in place to children. And there was a statistic I read recently that 80% of students with dyslexia aren't picked up until they get to university, because they can't read. They just can't read quickly enough, or they can't assimilate volumes of text, but of course they can read. And because they're brighter, they found good coping strategies, they've mastered it, and then they get to university, and there's often a different funding stream where the universities will often do the assessments cheaper or even free, and they suddenly get picked up. But it's just testament to the fact that they are so, they're amazing, some of these children, the way they can get through school. If they can just get to university, things are a lot easier for them.
They are. I think we just got ivvi, our company just got shortlisted for as a finalist for the BET Awards
Oh,
in
good.
January.
Yeah,
So
fabulous.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, for the send category. So we're really pleased with that. And we had to create this video as part of the application
Yeah.
and a 4-minute video. We were just kind of racking our brains, Joe and I, to say, how can you explain to people in a nutshell, dyslexia is not just about learning to read and what it is at university that is actually the big challenge. Because it's easy to say, oh, when they have find this difficult, they find that difficult. But what's the core of it? And I think we got it down to, tell me what you think about this. We got it down to one half of the difficulty with dyslexia is learning to read words. And
Yeah.
then the other half is learning to process words.
Yeah.
Because we think, oh, once you can read the word, you're sorted. But actually, with dyslexia, it's not about reading the words, it's about processing in words. We don't often think in words, we think in visuals. And we have to often take, and I'm using visuals in the widest sense possible, not just pictures, but non-words like movement, color,
Yeah.
gesture. It's something that is not encoded in a word. We have to decode it up into something we can visualize. And then we have to decode it back down into a word that we can communicate with. We don't think in words, we think in visuals more. And it's the issue is about reading the word and processing the word.
Yeah, the only trouble is every child is different. Every child's got a different profile. And I have come across some children who are very quick at processing and they've got different. So it's really difficult to come up with a one
Yes,
size fits
yes,
all for these children.
yes.
Some of them are very, and then you get children with hyperlexia. So they can read very well, very quickly, but they don't understand what they have read. You can acquire dyslexia through a brain injury as
Yeah.
well. So it's not necessarily something you're born, so it's
Yeah, I know. I knew this would happen speaking to a specialist who's you're looking at all these nuances, and when you're
yeah.
trying to kind of explain to people
Mm,
who are outside of dyslexia, maybe it was like, oh yeah, dyslexia is about reading, and once you've learned to read, you're sorted. And you're like, no, it's not sorted once you learn how to read, because the difficulty is with the word itself, not just reading the word, you know?
I know, and there's some really good technology out there, things like scanning pens and things like that. But there's, I still think children and adults can be taught to read, and if you just spend time with someone, spend time with a specialist, you can be taught to read.
Yes, and process, and it's not like you can't do it. It's like it's a lot more manual. You have to be a lot more intentional and find your way of doing it.
Yes, and I think on the stress, if you're in a stressful situation, all your strategies fall apart, don't they? And so that makes it more difficult. So in exam situations and things like that, then again, you've got to teach these children techniques to start their revision much earlier than everybody else because they can't cram for exams and they don't know they can't cram for exams either. So it's a long process.
Before we started this podcast, you start telling us a little bit about the conference you're about to do, and we don't know a huge amount about it. We put you on pause and said, "No, don't tell us. Just wait until we've recorded." Let's move on to. So we talked about the assessments and the benefits that come from it, and at the end of an assessment, often there's loads of recommendations, aren't there?
Yes.
And something that you've been focusing in on is this area of the recommendations at the end of an
Yeah.
assessment. Could you talk
Yeah.
to us a bit about the recommendations at the end of the assessment in this conference you're doing?
Well, so there could be recommendations at the end of a diagnostic assessment for a child or an adult, or the next stage for an adult would be a workplace needs assessment, which would recommend bits of software that would support that person in their employment. So there's lots of things that are out there. The world has just changed incredibly over the last few years in terms of what's out there. And there's a lot that's free out there as well. You don't have to pay for everything. And as assessors, we don't know what's out there necessarily. And so, although my previous conferences were around speakers talking about an aspect of perhaps reading or spelling or something like that, and I thought it'd be great to get everyone together to demo some of their some things. And that will be in Liverpool on April the 16th. And I'm hoping to be able to offer it free of charge to people who come, or at least only £10 or something to cover refreshments, lunch. And so that people can just come along, pick someone to listen to, hear about ivvi, hear about a different scanning pen or something like that as well. And then go away and really sort of understand where that could fit into a recommendation for that child or adult.
Okay, so it's kind of like a showcase of
Yeah.
what sort of tools are
Yeah.
out there that can help with dyslexia and why. And
Yeah.
then once the assessor kind of can see, I see
Yes.
why that would be recommended. Like, because you kind of know about speech to text, text to speech, you know
Yeah.
about mind mapping, you know about reading pens and so on,
No.
but you don't always know what particular practical applications are
Yeah.
out there now.
Yeah. But a lot of parents, when they're starting out, they don't really know what's out there. One of the things that I often recommend is a really old book called Toe by Toe.
Yes.
Very cheap, £35. It works. You don't always have to have something electronic, but it's knowing where to go for the parents as well as adults.
I see. Yes. So this conference is for people who from all ranges. It's not
I
going to
think
just
so.
be for
No.
teachers and so on. It's for
Yeah.
parents to come to.
Yeah.
Basically,
Yeah.
it's the sort of thing that's accessible for anyone who's looking for practical solutions in day-to-day life, whether it's at school, university, workplace.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously,
Yeah.
Liverpool's a great place because there's 3 universities there, and you've got Manchester also fairly near. But I think it's just be useful for people to know where they can go and just perhaps have a demo of a few things, take away some literature, and then decide what they want to put in place, either at home, at school, in work, that kind of thing.
And I know you mentioned, Katrina, not every solution's high tech. There's a sort of book that you often recommend as well, isn't there?
There is. I mean, I often recommend this very old book called Toe by Toe, which has been around for probably about 40 years. And it can get quite boring, but it works. And it's something to just, if you can just spend 5 minutes a day with a child, just going through it, even better if it can be supported at school as well. So there's that sort of dual aspect to it. It will really, really help somebody who's struggling with literacy.
Yeah. You'd be surprised how many people in America don't know about Toe by Toe. It's a very British book, I
It is.
think.
It's
And it's kind of like a lot of parents who do Orton Gillingham and all these sort of Barton reading programs and so on. Toe by Toe, to put it into the context, if you are in America or Australia, because I know a lot of people who are listening, is kind of like a phonics program, but a very simple, straightforward, open the book and just start doing it without any training sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm surprised it hasn't been done electronically because it's always paper based, but you can buy it on Amazon and so it's about £35.
Well, that's something that needs done, isn't it? Someone needs to somehow.
Not by us,
Right,
Darius.
yeah, okay, Joe, I won't do it.
Darius is like, oh, I've got a cousin at the weekend.
But I think there's a danger sometimes of just dipping into things without having that structured program. So things
Yes.
are lovely, but you can't just dip into it and expect it to work. It's got to be, unless you have got a program that goes with it, you need to follow it religiously, really, to get the most out of it.
That's why kind of these repetitive overlearning programs are so valuable for dyslexia. It's that overlearning aspect, little and often, and overlearning, multisensory, multimodal, so important. I'm not sure how multisensory, multimodal read and write toe by toe is. I've never actually done it much myself.
You're reading it, you're hearing it. I don't think you're doing so much writing, are you? But it's definitely auditory and visual.
Okay.
And I think sometimes it's trust the process, isn't it? Because I think it does take a little bit of time for these things to stick and these things to work, but it's not everything's going to be 100% successful. But I suppose it's that encouragement to parents, if you decide to go with something, you're going to try toe by toe or try another, give it a good chunk of trying it. Don't do it for 3 nights after school and then go, oh, okay, they're not reading Lord of the Rings yet, so it hasn't really worked.
But also, if the schools say that they're going to put in place a program for the child, and I will say to the parents, give the school a chance to show that it is working, because you can't have things work overnight. It's going to take, when I was working one-to-one with children, it would take a good 18 months for real progress to be made. So they'd come to me about an hour a week, one-to-one, but it was a good 18 months work. So it's no quick solution.
I've got to bring AI into this conversation since I run an AI software company, Katrina. So I've got this burning question, right? If you took and anonymized your dyslexia assessment, right? You deleted your name and personal details and so on from it, and then popped it into something like ChatGPT or something like that, and asked it to explain it to you, would it give you a half decent result that would be helpful to you?
I think it would. The actual reports that we do, the front of it is more of there's a summary, there's key points, there's action points. So even if you don't use ChatGPT, just look for those bullet points in the report. But yeah, ChatGPT would explain it to you. I don't think it's ever going to be any good replacing assessors, but
No, I'm not. I'm just thinking, as a parent, sometimes seeing if you could put in some of these numbers and go, what does, the 7th centile for processing, phonological processing actually mean? It would probably, because it's a pretty standard process and non-novel, it would probably give you the standard answer, which is like, yes, this is this type of processing, that, and so on. And it would give you some interesting insights, I think.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, it's good. I mean, I've tried it myself with the report that I've done, and ChatGPT hasn't come up with the same diagnosis as myself. So, but I think it would, because they haven't had the person in front of them. And so I've seen different things. So they've just gone by the scores. But I think, yes, in terms of explaining it to parents, it would be a good tool.
Well, I think for all we run an AI company, we're not in with both feet like AI is the definitive truth.
No.
I mean, I love the fact that when it gets it wrong, you describe it as hallucinating.
Oh,
but you'll say that AI has been hallucinating because one of the main things that it'll do, especially in a scientific paper, is it'll make up a reference.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I quite like that term. It's hallucinating. It started with something, but it's kind of extrapolated it beyond what it was able to do right now. And it's like you say, it doesn't have the nuance. It doesn't have all the observations. And I guess that kind of brings us back to the point that we're saying, though, isn't it? A screener will give you a great indication. Like AI could probably give you a decent indication, but it's those cues that you've been trained to pick up, that your experience has taught you, and it's how that all flows together.
It's all the information that I get as well beforehand. So were all the developmental milestones reached at the right times? Did the child walk at the right time, talk at the right time? Have they had a history of ear infections? All of that information that I'm gathering together beforehand during the assessment and then putting it all together afterwards is a really sort of, it's a skilled profession.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I have to say, I think let's get close to winding things up, but I have to say, I am so thankful for the dyslexia assessment that I got, and I'm so thankful for the ones we got for our children. And I think nearly every single person I've interviewed on this podcast who has had a dyslexia assessment has just traced it back and said, actually, I was a bit nervous or whatever, whether you're an adult or a child. It was transformative on so many stages forward in their life that it's just so valuable. So personally, I would say if you are considering getting a dyslexia assessment and you can afford it, and it is the right time of year and are not exhausted, like Katrina says at the end or in the middle of exams, whatever, it is a very valuable thing to do.
Yeah. We will assess from about the age of about 8 or 9. That's the best time to
Is it?
assess the child. And actually, most assessors would take payments over a couple of payments. We just want the best for the
Yeah.
children. So it is.
You're so self-deprecating, Katrina. It's so funny. You feel so bad about charging people the money for the assessments, don't you?
Went to the garage recently and they charged me £3,000 for a new clutch, and I thought, well, they're not very self-deprecating, are they? They didn't apologise once.
You know what I've said? I think you're dyslexic. I'll trade you an assessment or two.
I did that with my cat sitter, but no, not a garage.
Yeah, so I personally think it's one of the best investments you can make in your own life. Like I've even said in the past, if you got a car, sell it. Get yourself a dyslexia assessment and get a cheaper car or whatever, because the payoff is so useful. And I think from our experience with university, as we've been building ivvi over the last year, and it's just got released into the Disabled Students Allowance a year ago. And it's being recommended each week now by different assessors. And one of the reasons we wanted to do this was just to wake up parents to the importance of an assessment when it comes to university, because it's kind of like during school, you don't desperately need an assessment to get your extra time or certain accommodations, or the SEND department will help you whether you've got an assessment or not. And all of these kind of things, it's not absolutely essential. But when it comes to university, it is. And it's, in a way, it's better if you know that you're probably going to end up going to a university, or you'd like to keep that door open and get the thousands of pounds of extra assistance that comes with it if you've got dyslexia.
It's amazing.
Then get it sooner rather than later, I would say.
I agree. I'd also say if you have had an assessment done, and I'm guilty of this, with my son's assessment, I just look for the diagnosis and then put the whole report away. Some at different times take the report out, because we do future-proof them. We look at if the child's in primary, we will look at what will help them in secondary, what would help them in university. Don't just put it in a drawer and forget about it. And somebody would always go through a report with you. There are lots of dyslexia associations dotted around the country. The Adult Dyslexia Centre, the BDA, people like that, Dyslexia Scotland, they would always help you with the report, going through it as well if the original assessor can't do that.
Yes, and I highly recommend emailing it to yourself.
Yes.
Or making sure it's in your email somewhere with a title that's easy to search. It says dyslexia assessment. So you can find it like 15 years later or 12 years later in your Gmail or whatever.
And then normally they're password protected for confidentiality. So keep a note of the password as well.
Yes.
But they are.
That is really interesting. I'd never thought of digging it out in different circumstances. It's kind of like, it's like reading a book. You know how you can sometimes read a book and then you reread a book at a different time in your life and you get something more out of it. Basically, what you're saying is you can reread that assessment and something new will pop out of it, because there is literally just so much valuable information crammed into those pages.
We don't just say Johnny needs this in year 5 and that's stop there. We look at all different stages, what that child will need, and it's very tailored and very individual to that child.
And one of the things we have experienced with some of the strategy coaching that we do is sort of people have managed, like their hacks have worked up until a point and they've been promoted in work, or it's final year of university and there's a dissertation to write, and actually the report would be a really great thing to go back to and read at that stage and say, okay, my hacks aren't working anymore, but what the report said was this would really help. And so, because you might not have felt that pain point sufficiently enough to actually implement a recommendation, but the resource that you need or the advice you need might actually be sitting in the resource, the report, and you go back to it and go, right, okay, now it's going to be a good time to learn to mind map or to use that technique or that. So yeah, I mean, that's great advice to just revisit that at every key sort of stage or next stepping stone that you're on.
You don't have to read it. You can have an immersive reader and just listen to
Yeah.
No, you got me thinking. You got me thinking. Instead of immersive reader, this is what I would do. I would copy and paste that into ChatGPT and have a conversation with ChatGPT. And I would say, look, hey, or not, or Gemini or Grok or whatever your favorite LLM is, they're all pretty good right now and will be even better. But to just say, look, this is my dyslexia assessment. This is my circumstances right now. I've just become a manager, or I'm just going to third year of university, which is when I crashed and burned. I crashed and burned in third year of law school at Edinburgh University. All my hacks came to their limits, and I had to sort of leave university for 2 years and come back once I'd learned how to mind map and actually finish my degree, because I had a new skill to actually take notes with, which is why I'm so crazy about mind mapping. So I would take I think I should do this.
I think you should.
I've got my assessment. I'll get my
Or one of
assessment.
your children's as well, now that they are older. And
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. And so what would you do? I would take our daughter's assessment and say, our daughter's coming up to her final year of university right now. From this assessment, what sort of information in it that would be relevant right now for this time of our life? And then it would say, this bit here says that, that bit here's that. And then you could say, oh, that's interesting. Tell me what page it's on. And then you go to the page, you read through it maybe a bit. And then, oh, tell me more about what that means. And, or even get it to read it out to you. Notebook LM would be amazing with that. Have you ever tried Notebook LM?
No, I'm going to make a note of that.
So, that would be perfect for this, actually. So if you took your report and you put it into Google's service called Notebook LM, and basically what it does is it takes your document and pulls out all of the exact references from the document, and it doesn't make anything up or hallucinate. It's really disciplined about referencing your document, and you could have like up to 50 different documents in there. So if you had one document, it would do that, but it doesn't just do that. What it does is you might say to it, I would like this turned into a podcast that discusses this, and it will take that document, turn it into a podcast, and you just hit play, and these two people start having a conversation about your assessment report.
Oh, wow.
And then it doesn't stop there. You can tell it what type of podcast. Let's say you might say to it, oh, right, you are two assessors who are discussing my my dyslexia report and my needs assessment, for example, for the workplace. Tell me what you think in a podcast. So they start having this conversation. They'll start saying, right, yes, very, really fascinating what level of processing they've got, etc.
Oh, that's amazing.
We're going to be redundant. We'll just
No, we're not. No, we're not.
hook you up with it. It'd be much smoother.
No, we're not. No. We're just going to become even more capable of doing more things with what knowledge and insights we've got. But it gets even better, because what you can do is in the podcast, as it's playing the podcast, you can click join, okay? And you can join the podcast, and it goes, oh, hello, we've got a caller who's calling into the podcast. And then you say, and it's just between you and the AI in there. And you say, hi, I'm actually the author of this document. And they go, oh, this is fantastic. So glad to have you on here. We were wondering what you thought about what you meant by X, Y, or Z. Or you can say, I'm actually the person who had this done. And they go, oh, that's great. Have you got any questions? And you can start interacting in that way. So it's absolutely fascinating what kind of tools there are for multimodal learners like me with dyslexia. I don't want to read the report unless I absolutely have to. But to hear it in that kind of way, what happens though is you hear it and you go, gosh, that's interesting. And then you think, I'm going to go read that. And then you read it, and you read it more richly because you've got the context.
Oh, wow. Oh, we'll try it anyway with one of your children's reports and see if you get something else out of it, or if they get something else out of it. Yeah.
Well, Katrina, it's been fantastic. I think it would be useful to make sure that people who are listening have got just a quick overview of some of the things that resources you've got out there. This is not a sales pitch. You don't need to sell anything here.
No.
We know that everything you do is great. Just could you go through a bunch of different stuff that might be of interest to people who are listening?
So I have got some of my webinars on my website, which is www.positivedyslexia.co.uk. So there's lots of information about dyslexia on my website, some recorded webinars, some free stuff. I've got my own YouTube channel. There's lots of free stuff on the YouTube channel as well. And then I've got the parents course starting in January. I'm doing one of the sessions. And then I've got my level 3 course starting in February for teaching assistants. But there's often parents on there as well. And then they want to get into schools. They want to have qualification to work in schools. And this is accredited by OCN London and the BDA. So you get the ALSA accreditation afterwards, accredited learning support assistant. So that's really good. And then I've also got my workplace needs assessment course, next one in January. And that's training up people to use screening tools for adults to understand. Well, Darius, you did it, didn't you? And learning about all the range of different neurodiversities, what are reasonable adjustments, and then how to put them all together and put together a report that's suitable for workplace, for access to work. So recently we've had a lot of specialist assessors on the course because they want to know the next step. They want to do the diagnostic assessment and then do the needs assessment for the person because they've got that relationship with them and they'll go on and do the next bit.
That's so much easier once you've already made that connection and got that context and everything to move to the next level of what do you actually need to help you in your work. That's fantastic. And all the links in the show notes below, the blue links will be there. Just click on them. And you've also got that conference coming up?
April 16th at the Holiday Inn in Liverpool. So great links up to Liverpool. It's only 2.25 hours from London. Great train service up there as well, near to Manchester Airport, Liverpool Airport. So I think we had about 150 people in total at the last Liverpool one. So hopefully lots of people coming in, staying, chatting.
Yeah, it was lovely. It was lovely last year.
Yeah, it's just we just these things are great, being able to do something. You're in Scotland, I'm down south, but actually being able to talk to people in person about what you're worried about with your child, what do you think would help your child, what do you think would help as a university student. I think it's really valuable.
What I've noticed about going to these in-person events, when someone's made all of that effort to show up in person, there's huge level of commitment, determination, interest, engagement, that when you go there and you start speaking to a person, it's not just 150 people. It's the equivalent of being around thousands of people, but you've found all of those people who are having similar thoughts and ideas, and there's that synergy that happens there, and you come across those 2, 3, or 4 people that move you on into the next. Do you know what? I don't know if it was no, it wasn't actually. I'm just thinking it was Aaron's dyslexia show where I went down there and we met, and I think Aaron did it and then we did yours afterwards, or one way or another. But having these local personal shows is so valuable. Thank you very much for doing that. Because as we can see from what Aaron has done, it was so hard. He had to stop that show because it just got too much. It benefited so much, but you're just keeping on plugging on and making it sustainable, and it's really great.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully there'll be more in the future, but BDA don't seem to be doing any sort of live ones, do they? So they're sort of less and less. I think more people are doing online.
Yes, it's such a big commitment, isn't it? I mean, it's a huge financial commitment for you. I know that for sure. You got to do it up front. There's a lot of risk involved. Something might happen on the day and people don't show up or whatever. You just never know.
Yeah, we're just building your excitement here.
Yeah.
Well, actually, when it gets to the day, that's actually, I'm quite relieved. When it gets to the day, I think nothing more can happen now, but it's leading up to it. That's the problem, as you say, that you have to pay for the hotel in advance, the food in advance, all of those things. And it is, when you're doing it completely on your own, it is a big commitment. But haven't had any problems so far.
Well, thank you very much for doing it, and I highly recommend it.
Good.
Fly
then we'll have
down.
one in October in St Mary's University in London as well. But that's going to be more for schools and Senkos and assessors and things like that, trainers.
Yeah, well, since
Brilliant.
this is an evergreen podcast, let's be very specific. We've been going for like 7 years, 6, 7 years. So we'll just be very specific. It's April 2026 and
Yeah,
October
yeah,
2026.
yeah.
Yes,
So
brilliant.
St Mary's University is in Twickenham, just outside London, and that's the venue for the October one.
Fantastic. Links in the show notes below. Joe, any final questions to sort of lead us out?
Well, I think we've covered so much. And yeah, I would just really encourage people, have a look at the links. We know you, Katrina. We know that your heart is to help people. So if people still have questions or they want to get in touch, they can reach out to us or to you. And just really to encourage parents that there are so many resources and so much help that you can get out there when you're navigating this, especially if it's for the first time. It feels really quite overwhelming, but there are wise guides out there. So make the most of them.
There is also financial support as well. So the British Dyslexia Association just announced another round of bursary funds.
Oh, wow.
Helen Arkell also, that they're limited, but they have got some. Helen Arkell have got some as well. And also the Adult Dyslexia Centre have got a few small pots that they can access also. Local dyslexia associations, they may have small pots of funding also. So always worth asking if money's a difficulty to fund a full report.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that just crossed my mind is with the workplace, is it's useful to bear in mind that you do not need a dyslexia assessment for access to work. You
No.
just need to show the traits. And that's one of the interesting things about access to work is in order to make it accessible, you just need to tell them, these are the traits of dyslexia I've got. These are the traits of ADHD I've got, and this is how it's impacting me. And they will accept that, and they really will. They don't through the back door say, oh, right, you need a proper report or anything like that. So actually, that's one of the scenarios where you really don't need a report, isn't it?
Unless you're like one of my accountants who is also doing professional exams, and they do need the report. They need less than 5 years. It might even be less than that. But yeah, they have to do the whole thing again, even if they had it done at university.
Well, that sounds crazy, but thankfully it's an exemption. It's the exemption rather than the rule. I hope it doesn't become the rule, because that's
No,
going
I
to be
don't
quite
think it
hard.
will. No, but definitely for access to work at the moment, it's just self-identification. It's just that the waiting time has got very long for
So
access.
isn't it interesting, actually, at school, you don't need the dyslexia assessment to access a lot of these accommodations and things like that. At work, you don't need it, but at university, you absolutely definitely do. So that's interesting to see that kind of sort of broader scope.
Continue, but university, I don't know. Well, it's different funding streams, so hopefully.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
But I suppose it raises the question of raises the perspective of sort of the why you get the report. I mean, that's talking about very much getting it for external agencies and for external requirements. But actually, our lived experience has been that there's a very personal benefit getting the assessment to understanding yourself, to figuring out how you apply yourself to all different situations, because really schoolwork, university, they're part of what you do. But if you have dyslexia, then it's not that it only manifests at work or at university or at school. It's how do you actually build a life that brings you joy and that's not overwhelming. So I suppose there's absolute requirements for a report or an assessment at different life stages or different situations. But for the personal validation and benefit, I'd still think that there's a lot of merit in a full assessment.
Yeah, I love that. Internal and external reasons for a dyslexia report. I've never actually thought of it with that clarity of internal and external. It's a very powerful paradigm to view it through.
Well, it's about learning to understand yourself, isn't it? As being the first step when you're on your journey, and for the parents to understand their child as well.
Is there another perspective as well? Because from an internal and external perspective, I can see how it's valuable to me, but also the parental, how would you characterize that parental understanding of your child, Joe? You've kind of experienced that. How would you characterize that parental understanding?
Well, I suppose that's still, I suppose that's still almost sort of an internal or familial. It's about your personal interactions. It's not about a life requirement.
So when we do an assessment of a child, we'll send out a questionnaire to the parents and we'll send out a questionnaire to the school. School will often send me back the questionnaire saying, this child's not even on our radar. We hadn't even thought that this child had dyslexia. So in a way, it's almost like a validation for that parent. Report comes back and they can go in, because the parent's perception, they're generally correct about their child. They're the ones going into the school saying, I think my child's dyslexic, and they're being fobbed off. And they're generally right, aren't they? So it's an opportunity for the parent to have that validation. I was correct all this time. Now, please listen to me. So I think it is important for the parents in that respect, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we could keep talking. This has been so valuable, Katrina, every time. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure. And do contact me at any time if anyone's got any questions.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's just going to be so helpful for so many people listening. So really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.